Okay, so by now you should have a good list of all of your measurements, whether it's your walls, your furniture, and you've recorded this down. What I've done is I've gone through and I've recorded the measurements, both the front and the side of all the furniture in my room. And I've also went through, and every wall in my room I've chosen, I have all those measurements recorded as well, okay? So what I'm going to start with is I need to first prepare my piece of paper for a drafting, right? So what I have here is a drafting table. You're kind of seeing it at an angle. What I have here is I got a scrap piece of paper to kind of help me along. I have my two straight edges I'm going to work with. Yours could be a yardstick. It could be a piece of a board. It can be anything that's very straight. That's what we want to do. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my little ruler here. And the first thing I want to do, that has nothing to do with the measurements we took, but we need to prepare the paper. So we create a border around the edge. Now I prefer 1/2 of an inch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure here from the edge of the paper over 1/2 of an inch, make a little mark. I'll move up here, measure from the edge of the paper over 1/2 of an inch, make a little mark. And I make my way all the way around the paper, making little 1/2 inch marks, little bit. Whoops, that's not quite right. That was a 1/4 inch. You're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. So I'm going to go here at 1/2 inch there. This is why we said earlier, measure twice, cut once. In this case, measure twice, draw once. So I'm going to do that. So you see, even I made the mistake. So I'm going to measure from the 1 inch mark here down to 1/2 inch. And I'm going to make my way all the way around. There's 1 inch. I'll measure over 1/2 an inch and make just a little dot. Same thing down here. I'm just looking for a little 1/2 inch, exactly 1/2. And if you remember, we talked about this, that halfway mark, the long line is an inch mark, and halfway between it is the 1/2 inch. That's what we're looking for. So we're going to make our way all the way around, making little 1/2 inch marks. All right, right from there, here. All right, now I'm going to take a straight edge, right? I have a couple here, so I can use this one here. And I'm going to connect the dots. I'm basically going to line this up. And I don't want to go too far. I'm going to lightly go from 1/2 down, 1/2 of an inch down, through each of these dots, down to the other half. So I have a nice straight line. Now the border, that's what you're doing, you're creating a border, should be just like your section line. It should be a thicker line. So if we remember, our section lines are a thick, heavy line. And I usually like to do 2 passes. It's kind of thick. That would be our section. Right? If I were to do an outline of it, I have 1 pass. It's not quite as thick as this, a little bit less. All right, and if I'm doing some form of a hidden line, it's going to be a very faint line, and it's going to be a dash in regular intervals. I'm not going to be making big long and shorts and long and shorts, right? And so this is my hidden. So if we look at this, you'll see this one's thicker than this one, just by a bit. It feels darker. This is my outline of all the objects, and this dash line is much thinner, much lighter. That tells me it's hidden. All right, so all of my graphic lines, right? Remember, we have things like leaders, right? So if I do a leader line with a little arrow, and I say this is, let's say, object, right? Even that line is lightweight. This little leader line, which tells me something, is just like this hidden line. It's that lightweight line. It's not as thick as the outline, definitely not as thick as the section line. Okay, so we're going to do our outline just like the section line, pretty thick and heavy. All right, so I'm going to make my way all the way around. I'm going to connect the dots. So I've got this little mark here. What I like to do too is I'll put this down and I'll kind of move it until my pencil lead touches right on that line. Same thing here. And when I'm comfortable with that, that's when I draw the line. Now I like to make 2 passes, maybe even 3. Just make that nice and solid and dark. Same thing with the original line we did. I did it too light. There's a couple passes. This one up here. I'm going to line up my pencil with that mark and adjust this down to the other one. Pinch it in the middle, and I will draw my line. Connect right to the corner. Make sure that this is nice and dark. And then we have our last little line for our border. All right, so I'm going to move that over and make sure that my pencil just touches that line. Touches the line here, and I'm going to touch that line, come down and touch that. And now I'll just make it nice and dark. Make sure you touch it good and solid, all right? So what we have now is we have the first step of our drafting plate laid out. We have a nice border going all the way that is 1/2 of an inch in from the edge, all right? The next step we need to do to prep our paper is to put a title block onto our drafting. Now, typically a title block is something that's a little personal to whoever is the drafter of a show. If it's a set designer, if it's a lighting designer, if even a costume designer sometimes will do forms of drafting. But a standard basic title block is essentially just a label for the plate. It will have the name of the production that it comes from. So if it originating from Long Beach City College, it would have here the show title, right? If we're doing, say, Guys and Dolls, what the particular plate, so every page of a drafting is called a plate. What is it? So is this in this case it's a ground plan. We usually have the director's name, the designer's name, the technical director's name. Often the drafter is not the same as any of these people, so you may have another person who's just the draftsman. There's usually an approved section that allows for once it's been approved by either the technical director or the director, they sign off on it, they agree to it. The date is important because when was this drafted? The scale is absolutely important. In this case, we're going to draft it in 1/2 of an inch equals 1 foot 0 inches. We also put down what plate number. So we label the plate. We give it a name. So in this case, it would be like D1, right? Drawing number 1 or drawing number 2. Every page is stacked in such a way that they go in an order. And there may be other things like other dates, or this date was for approved, where this date is for when the drawing was made, that sort of thing. Now that's for a drafting for a production. In your project, we aren't necessarily need all that information. We need to know what this is. This is your room, your bedroom, your living room, your whatever room, right? You need to make sure that you put my name, your instructor's name, you put your name, who you are. You're the draftsman and the designer. Put the date, put the scale. I've listed all the parts that are in the assignment below, so make sure that you look at that to make sure that you include all those things in your title block. So this particular title block, if I look at it, is 5 inches wide and 2.5 inches tall. All right. I can then segment this out and to give a little area for each of those different components of our project, okay? So what I'll do is I'll start off just like we did all of this. I'm going to take my ruler, take my pencil, and I'm going to first go, now I'm working within my framework. Now I like to typically grab a scrap piece of paper, if I can find it, and I just like to lay it down over my paper. Anytime I've made a mark, what that does is as I have my arm on my paper, I'm not going to transfer any of my oils from my hands to the paper. I'm also not going to smudge whatever I did underneath. So if you're an artist, you like to draw or you like to do anything with pencil, this is a good habit to do, is have your scrap paper that you can lay on, you can move your hand on, and you have no worries about messing up the work you've done underneath. All right, so back to this. I'm going to lay this on the corner at 5 inches, right on the line I made earlier. And I'm going to make a little mark here. And then I'm going to move up a little bit and do the same thing, 5 inches. And then I'm going to measure from here 2.5 inches. And I'm going to measure along those two little dots again, 2.5 inches. Now all I do, just like we did before, I connect the dots. So I'm going to make a little line here, connect the dots. And I like to do this again with that kind of heavy section line. So I lifted it up a little too soon. I'm going to come over it a couple times. And if you see, sometimes whenever I go up and I'll twist my pencil just a little bit, what that does is that gives a different angle as it comes in for every line. It makes that line a little bit thicker. All right. So now I'm going to go do this one here as well. I'll line that up, put my fingers there to keep it in place. I'm going to draw a line, draw another one, and let's finish it off. All right. So there's our title block square. Now it's up to me to decide how I want to design this. So you can find, if you look online, you can use the one that's in the module. You can see Derek Jones has a nice upper rectangular one. It's for his lighting design. It's more this direction. The ones I do for my drafting are narrow and run the whole length of the edge of the paper here. I just decide that I don't like this little corner cut out of my drawing. I'd rather just sacrifice one bit, an inch or two on the side, and then my drawing space is still nice and rectangular. That's just my personal preference. The standard or the traditional way is to do this, where you block out one corner of your drawing for the label. And so you needed to choose which of those you want to do. All right, so go through the list, all right? Look at all the different parts, the name of your room, the class title, my name, your name, the date, the scale, which is 1/2 inch equals 1 foot dash 0 inches. It's plate number 1, right? We're only doing one plate, so it's 1 of 1. Sometimes if you have multiple plates of drafting, you would have multiple numbers. So you would have 1 of 10, 2 of 10, 3 of 10. That way you know in communication, when you're talking to, say, a technical director, I'm looking at plate number 4. I'm looking at plate number 7. And they know what plate you're looking at when they're talking on the phone. All right? So complete this. Go ahead and make out your title block. Now, what I'm going to do is, and this is important, is lettering. Lettering is very important. Lettering is typically done at 1/8 of an inch high, all right? And the way to practice this is, if I have the line here of, I'm going to use the scrap paper here, right? So I'm not drawing on my actual plate. I will put a line, let's say this is the top edge of my title block here, okay? I'm going to kind of trace this out. You shouldn't really use your architect scale as a straight edge because it's not very flat, but I'm going to for the purposes of this demonstration here. What you'll want to do is you'll want to measure down from the line, let's say about 1/8 of an inch. That's that second longest tick, or third longest tick. Again, a little dot, and then very lightly, I mean almost invisible, very light touch, make a little line. You probably can't even see it on the camera here. And below that, I'm going to again make a mark and a little dot for 1/8 of an inch. Again over here, make a dot for 1/8 of an inch. And I'm going to connect the dots as well. All right. So I have what are called guidelines to allow, so that now I have something that I can write between and keep my lettering nice and accurate. This is the same idea as when you were in kindergarten, first grade, and you were learning to write between those lines all your alphabet. Same idea. So in this case, I'm going to write my bedroom. I'm going to write it all in capital letters. with very blocky. So every letter should roughly be an 1/8 inch tall by an 1/8 inch wide. It's a very blocky shape. So I'm going to write well, in my case, I'm going to write my office, right? So it's my office. My office. All right. So in this case, it's very blocky. It stands out from the background, and it has almost a cartoon. If you think about the cartoon bubbles that are in comic books, similar feel, but very, very legible. That's the point. We want to make sure that everything we write has a clear legibility. Anybody can read it. All right. The same thing will go when you do dimensioning. When you have to, I often will use the thickness of the ruler to do my measurements for whenever I'm doing my extension lines for a measurement. And inside, let's say this was 12 feet 0 inches. Within this mark here, I'm going to do an 1/8 inch. So I'm going to put a 1/16 of an inch on either side of that line, and a 1/16 of an inch on either side again. I'm going to connect the dots. And within that, now I have those lines, so I can then draw 12 feet 0 inches. It's very legible, and I know the last thing I do is I put my little arrows on the end, and that gives me my nice dimension line, right? So we want to get in the habit of using these types of guidelines whenever we're doing any type of dimensioning or wording on our drafting. Okay, so for now, go ahead and take the moment to sketch out how you think you want to do your title block. Maybe you want to put a little number 1, plate 1 in the corner. Maybe you want a couple lines here, scale and date. And this is my room. Design it out. Take a moment to figure out how many lines do you need, how many spaces do you need to divide this into in order to put all of that information in. Okay, so take that time to do that now.